Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, but I would say that this brewery are best known for their different New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but also for their big, fruity, juicy, modern, whatever you want to call them, sour beers. So if those two style categories are ones that catch your interest, then this is one of the Swedish breweries that you definitely want to check out. So looking forward to trying this one. This is a style that I know this brewery can do very, very well, and this is supposed to be a very well done example of that style, and it's also quite highly rated. So let's crack on and see what we have here. For this review then, we are going to head back up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get the Gothenburg catchphrase in when it comes to Gothenburg beers because that is just channel tradition these days. And for this review, we are going to return to the wonderful Fermenterarna, or the fermenters as it would be in English. But this particular beer is called Frequent Fishing. It comes in at 8% ABV, and this is a New England hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. Now, this beer was released as part of the Lokalt Osmoskalig assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden. I forget exactly for which month, but I will point out this one is not in its optimum condition at the time I'm reviewing it, but it still will be very good, I'm sure, because they do very good New England hazy IPAs at Fermenterarna. But yeah, glad that I got to try this one, and it has been a good wee while actually since I've had a beer from Fermenterarna. So let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna, and we will no doubt add to that in the near future. There's all the usual social media, and if you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel, and you can check out the different beer playlists there. You will find this one in the Sweden playlist. They're all separated by country, of course. So yeah, let's crack on then and get started on my brewery notes for this one. So to tell you a little bit about Fermenterarna then. So Fermenterarna was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company together back in 2018. So the brewery was originally based in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, a little bit to the north of Gothenburg and actually very close to the Norwegian border. And apparently Niklas got into beer having ordered a beer one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this was the Tropic Thunder from Dugges Brewery, which was one of the first big fruity juicy sour beers that came over here, and it was a collaboration with Stillwater Artisanal, of course, but that is actually somewhat of a Swedish classic these days in my opinion. But Anna, on the other hand, she had a long interest in things that ferment, and she actually ran the restaurant Coasters Trädgårdar and has served various things through there, such as sauerkraut, sourdough bread, you name it, she's played with it and fermented it essentially. But the brewery started out with a very small 200 litre brew kit and tanks, and then in late 2018 they actually took a break to expand the company because their beers were received very well at various different festivals that they'd attended. But they then had a new facility with two 500 litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of 17,000 litres, and over the course of 2019 they were aiming to brew 50,000 litres, but at that time they said they had the equipment to brew 250,000 litres of beer per year. Over the following years they continued to develop new recipes and expand a little bit, get their beers spread out a little bit more, and in August of 2021 they moved to a new brewery in Hisingen down in Gothenburg, taking their equipment with them, but they also received a new 3,000 litre brewing kit later in the year, and they are planning to open up a tap room and restaurant at this brewery, from what I understand. So these are things to keep an eye on in the future. But according to Untappd, they've produced around 145 different beers as of September 2022. And as I mentioned to you earlier, these guys are particularly well known for their New England hazies and also for their big, fruity, juicy, Nordic, modern, whatever you want to call them, sours. So yeah, this is a brewery that I would definitely recommend that you check out if you get the chance. But yeah, that's everything I can tell you about Fermenterarna for the moment. Definitely a Swedish brewery to have a look at. These guys are one of my favourites in the recent generation of Swedish breweries just now, but there are many, many more opening up, of course. But yeah, lots of good beer in Gothenburg, and Fermenterarna, having moved there, are only adding to that in my opinion. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, check out the brewery website. You can also have a look at the other beers I've reviewed from these guys as well, and you know, just go and try some of their beers. But that is what we are going to do now. We are going to have a little look at this one itself. So Just to let you have a little look at the artwork on this one. Once again, we have this very distinctive Fermenterarna artwork. They always have these white cans with really quite striking images on them. Very well done, I have to say. It is a gold top can, and here on the side of the can you can see the Fermenterarna symbol, which I think is quite cool actually. I do like that. But yeah, 440ml can, this one, and I believe I paid 55 Swedish kronor for this. So that's about €5.50. £5 sterling, maybe somewhere in the region of $6 American for those of you watching in different parts of the world. So the hops in this one are Citra, Mosaic and Idaho 7. These are hops that we all know very, very well. All 4 of them American, all 4 of them 14% alpha acid, if I'm remembering correctly. Idaho 7 is going to give you the very soft, juicy mango, along with a lot of apricot and pineapple and some papayas and stuff like this. Citra is going to give you that big mango with a good bit of passion fruit and grapefruit behind it, but also a nice kind of lemony lime thing depending on how it goes. And then you've got the Mosaic, which has that big tangerine juiciness to it, but also a little touch of earthiness, I find. So yeah, we've got a very well known hop profile on this one, but yeah, curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. But let's get cracking with it then. The Frequent Fishing 8% New England Double IPA from Fermenterarna up in Gothenburg. Crack this beer open and see what we have. I was worried it was going to explode there because the can, before I was filming, it fell over, but it seems to be okay. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we go. Ooh, that does look very, very nice. Now, first things first then, appearance-wise. As you can see, this beer has poured with a lovely, more than 3/4 finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. You can see there are some very, very small bubbles there, but it does have a slight degree of bumpiness near the top, but it certainly looks very, very nice. In terms of colour of this beer, it's one of the brightest yellow beers that I've come across actually. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking to the side of the glass, not too many, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, but if we shine the light through it, you can see there's a steady stream of carbonation just heading up there, and the head is just fading away to be a very thin foamy layer. Now in terms of the haziness of this beer, remember in New England IPAs the haze depends on the oak content, wheat content and the yeast that you use to a degree. There's no real rule about going up the alcohol scale, you know, there's more wheat, there's more oats, therefore it should be more hazy. Doesn't always work like that, you know, it just varies from beer to beer and brewery to brewery. But for an 8% one, this is definitely not the haziest one that I've come across, but it certainly does have a good bit of opacity to it, but not so soupy and gloopy. Colour-wise, I would describe this one as being like a sort of mango juice colour. Very, very bright yellow. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, can affect that, of course, as well, and usually they do. But in New England IPAs, we do not have to care about those so often. I'll also point out as well that there is maybe about 20% of the beer or so still left in the can. But yeah, appearance wise, nothing too surprising about this one when you consider what style it is, and I would say that this is actually quite close in colour to some of the other ones that we've had from Fermenterarna in the past. Quite often you can get these brighter yellow and more pale beers from these guys. But yeah, nothing else we need to say about the appearance. Let's have a closer look at the aroma and see what we have with this one then. Oh yeah, this is quite interesting. So I'm going to say straight away, this beer, the first thing I'm getting out of this, I'm getting a lot of grassiness and I'm getting a lot of kind of juicy, fruity notes. There's a good bit of citrusy character coming out of it. Not too much in the way of orange, it's actually a bit more of the kind of lemon limey sort of thing from the Citra I'm getting straight away, but at the back of this one there's a good little bit of herbal and kind of vegetally character coming out of it actually. So yeah, as I've said before, for me there are 6 directions you can take a New England IPA, and it can be sort of more farmhousey and yeasty, more rye leaning and grainy, barley malt and bready, wheaty bitey, oaty creamy, or it can be a little bit more kind of sweet. You know, can have a little bit of a caramel butterscotchy type note to it. This one for me actually comes across as being really quite farmhousey in a lot of ways, so that's really interesting. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what that is, because I mean I think Fermenterarna have probably developed their own house yeasts over the last little while, but what you quite often find with these Fermenterarna beers is that they'll smell really farmhousey and kind of grainy and yeasty and crackery almost, and that's what you're getting out of this one. But then when you actually taste them, the flavour profile can be very, very different to that. But yeah, backbone of this beer, absolutely. There's a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. That's forming the backbone of the beer. I'm getting a lot of like Jacob's cream cracker, a little bit of Knäckebröd, like sort of a more grainy cracker toward the back of the nose, a little bit of brown bread in there. You get this really wholemeally, brown bready sort of thing from the yeast in the back of the nose. There's almost a wee touch of a peppery note to it, in a sense. But when you take the aroma in more deeply, and once your nose adjusts to it, you actually start to get a good little bit of the wheat, and the wheat comes across as being quite smooth. But I'm getting more and more of the kind of creamy oats coming out of the beer as well. I will say too, you get a little touch of butterscotch, butter candy, out of this beer. But yeah, this one is actually more of a kind of, it reminds me of some of the older Gothenburg IPAs, like the New England IPAs, like, if you think about the Amazing Haze, the GBG Beer Week 2016 from Stigbergets, or of course the Oat Narangi, it's got a little bit more of that coming out of it. This one, it doesn't have the big sweetness that some of these beers can have today, but it certainly has a bit more of a yeasty, farmhousey sort of thing. But you will, as I say, often find that with Fermenterarna. But the more you smell it, the more the oats come out, and it kind of sweetens up a little bit as well. I would say that. One or two woody aromas coming out of it. But yeah, the sort of grainy bread crust and wholemeal brown bready sort of thing is what's forming the backbone of this beer for me. I like how that goes together, absolutely. So, in terms of the green component, I actually get a good little bit of a kind of earthy note out of this one, and that I think is going to be from the mosaic. There's a good little bit of herbal character as well, and I'd be very curious to know whether that's more to do with the yeast or the hops. I think it's most likely to do with the kind of yeast in this case, because it is quite vegetally. But other than that, on the green component, it's quite a wet and quite zesty, grassy character getting out of this one. There is an element of floral note in the beer, but it does lean towards that kind of wet, freshly cut grass type thing. Now remember, New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hopping for the most part. They will have some early addition hops. Early addition hops give you most of your bitterness. Late addition hops give you a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And then dry hopping it gives you pretty much all flavour and aroma. So this one, I think, it's got a little bit of early addition hop, but mainly, most of this is relying on your late addition and your dry hopping. But yeah, freshly cut grass on the green component for me for the most part, but a little bit of floral character and a wee bit of earthy herbal note. On the fruity side of things, you can get all of the hops in this. For me, the Idaho 7's forming the backbone. You get that soft kind of papaya note and apricot as well. That's the Idaho 7. You do get a bit of that juicy mango, and that's going to be both the Citra and Idaho 7 that are giving you that. I don't get so much in the way of the stronger passion fruit that Citra can sometimes give you. But yeah, there is a nice juicy tangerine orange in there, and you get a little bit of the kind of lemon limey character that you would get from the from Citra as well. So yeah, for me, the fruity notes kind of lean toward a juicy mango, definitely a bit of apricot. You get a juicier pineapple in there, and there's also a wee touch of a kind of there's a kind of lemony limey note to this one as well. It shows off all the hops quite nicely, but I think Idaho 7's forming the backbone, and it is showing a bit more than the other two in my opinion. But yeah, you get the tangerine from the mosaic for sure, and a bit of the lemon limey character from the Citra. So yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business in terms of the aroma. So let's put the rest of it in, and we'll have a taste of this then. As I always say, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma of your beer before you get stuck into it. But we are going to have a taste of this one then. So yeah, this one is the Frequent Fishing 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Fermenterarna, originally from Strömstad, now based in Gothenburg. Slange, skål, cheers. Ooh, that is nice. First thing I'm going to say about this one, it's interesting because I always found the Fermenterarna beers always have this really light and wet mouthfeel in my experience, but they've got a little bit of this almost kind of chalky dryness to them. But with this one, they're saying this, it says on the Untappd that this is the creamiest New England they've ever done, and you can feel that. You can feel that oatiness in there, for sure. So this one still has that kind of trademark cleanliness and wetness that you'll always get from Fermenterarna, but you're getting a wee bit of the kind of chalky character I was talking about too, but you can get the big oaty creamy character in the middle of it as well. So this is an interesting sort of change of pace, but remember, it has been a wee while since I've had a Fermenterarna beer. I always try to review at least one of the IPAs that they release every month because they always tend to be pretty good. But yeah, I like this one. This gets another thumbs up from me. It's a bit difficult to compare it to the other ones because, as I say, it has been a while. But in terms of just rating it as a standalone beer, if we like, this is pretty damn solid. So well done once again to Fermenterarna for this one. But I will say, the impression I'm getting of it this time, it has got a little bit more of that yeasty, slightly farmhousey character to it, but at the same time you're getting the oatiness and the barley malt bread coming out of this. So this has got three different aspects of the New England IPA that we talked about earlier. And I will say too, it covers its alcohol very, very well. For an 8%er, this one goes down very, very easily. But yeah, it's the flavour profile is quite different to what the aroma would have you believe, and you quite often get this with the Fermenterarna stuff. So let's break it down and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So, middle third of your palate then, the malty side of things. Backbone of the beer, you absolutely get a little bit of this fresh white bread, hedgehog bread crust. That is the backbone of this beer. On top of that, you're getting a layer that's sort of a mix between like a fluffy, fresh white bread, but there's also elements of a kind of Jacob's cream cracker in there. Toward the front of that middle third of the palate, when it kind of dries out, the further into the aftertaste you go, I think we start to get a little bit of a slightly woody character to this one. And that's, again, another thing that you quite often pick up in these Fermenterarna beers. Maybe they've used a little bit of like chip malt or something like that in here, or the name of the very old German wheat has gone right out of my head. Maybe there's a little bit of that being used in this one. That's going to annoy me now. What is that very old German wheat that gets spelt? That's it. There's maybe a little bit of that in this one. It just has a wee bit of that sort of graininess. So you can feel the wheat sort of thickening out that white bread, especially the more and more that you drink of this beer. But yeah, bread crust, the sort of bread crusty notes I say, then a sort of fresh, fluffy white bread, and then you've got that kind of Jacob's cream cracker thing. As you go into the aftertaste, what you can feel forming on top of the Jacob's cream cracker is a more kind of slightly, you can feel the wheat just smoothing things out, but then you really start to get the oats coming out of this beer. And as I've always said, for me, in a New England IPA, oats are usually an indicator of how fresh the beer is. You know, the older the New England IPA gets, the more dryness you get out of the oats. In this one, you get a little touch of dryness out of the oats, but they still seem quite wet and quite creamy to me. So this beer has held up quite well over the 2, maybe 3 months since it was canned. So that's a good sign, and that shows you Fermenterarna are doing stuff pretty well. But yeah, on top of that kind of slightly thickening wheat layer, that more dense white bready layer you've got above the crackers, you can feel the creaminess of the oats there. So let's look at that. So yeah, it's interesting because down the kind of middle line of your tongue, you can feel that big creamy oaty, almost slightly porridgey type thing. So you get that out of this beer. But yeah, you have the you've got this really nice you can feel that down in the sort of middle of your tongue, you've got a little circle there, and you can feel where the alcohol's coming out of the beer. You get a bit of that butterscotchy, butter candy type thing there. And it does take a bit of a back seat, but obviously at 8% ABV, you are going to expect a little bit of that. So there is a wee touch of that slightly brown sugary sweetness in the dead centre of your palate. But as you go down the middle line of the tongue, you've got this really creamy, porridgey sort of oaty character. And as you move out toward the edge of the palate, you start to get a little bit of dryness and a slight sweetness from the oats in this beer. So yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate and the maltiness that you get there. It's very nicely done. So on the back third, the palate, then you're getting a good few things coming out there. So the back third of the palate, you've got a really nice little bit of, you do have a little bit of a more kind of grainy bread crusty sort of thing coming out of this one. It does get a little bit more like a kind of brown bread. On the back, on top of that, you get a bit more of a kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of thing coming out of it. And you can feel on top of that, there's a little bit of a kind of bitiness from the wheat. The bitiness actually might be more in the kind of area between the middle third and the back third of your palate, but you can certainly feel a little bit more of a bitey, wheaty character coming out of this beer, which is quite interesting. But on top of that kind of wheaty bite layer, you can feel the yeast coming out of this, and there are one or two sort of slightly woody, sort of woody and kind of dry farmhousey characters in there. You can feel that slightly more airy, dry, slightly woody white bread sitting on top of that all at the back third of the palate, and you can feel that on the back third of your tongue the flavour is just that little bit taller, and as you come further forward it just condenses down a little bit, and that goes together really, really nicely. So yeah, the flavours that you're getting out of this beer on the malty side of things, I think, are very nice. And you know, the further you go into the aftertaste, you do get more of that oatiness and a little touch of the sweetness. But some of the farmhousey notes that are the trademark, I would say, of Fermenterarna are just kind of sitting there. On the hoppy side of things, then, back corners of the palate, you have got a little bit of earthiness there. You get a little bit of herbal character as you come further forward, but nowhere near as much as you would expect of the beer when you consider how it smells. That is where it really differs in the aroma. The green component for me overall is actually really wet in this one. So as you move further forward, you can feel there's a bit of floral character just builds in this, but round the front curve of the palate, it certainly gets lighter. It certainly gets a bit lighter and a wee bit more kind of grassy, if you like. And it's quite a wet grassiness, but with a bit of zest behind it that you're getting in this. But I think that's everything we need to say about the green component in this one. Let's look at the front third of the palate then. So the border region between front third and middle third of the palate, again, you get a little bit of that bready build-up in there. The base of the front third of the palate is more kind of white bready, I would say, but then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at that. So yeah, I will also say the fruity component has a wee more pungency to it than I was expecting from the aroma as well. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you get a bit of the stronger passion fruit. I'm not really getting the grapefruit that you can sometimes get from Citra. Only if there is any, it's a tiny little bit, but you get a more pungent passion fruit at the back of that front third of your palate. And as you move further forward, you start to get the juicier mango. Then in the middle of that front third of your palate, you get the kind of the apricot and the kind of sort of juicy pineapple notes. And then into the front half of that front third of the palate, the front sixth of your tongue, if you like, you can feel the kind of oily tangerine from the mosaic coming out. As I said earlier, the Idaho 7 is going to give you the kind of softer notes, the juicier pineapple, but also the apricot and things. And then both of the Citra and the Idaho 7 are going to give you the big juicy mango. So there's a lot of mango in this beer, and it has got a bit of ripeness to it as well, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, as you move right toward the kind of tip of the tongue, you've got that tangerine, that more oily tangerine orange from the mosaic, and then a wee bit of the lemon limey character just behind the front tip of the tongue, and that mixes in with all the grassy esters that are coming out of this beer. And into the aftertaste, it is the kind of lemon limey note and the orange, I think, that lingers there. The sort of tropical fruits just take a wee bit of a back seat, other than the passion fruit. The passion fruit pungency is also kind of sitting in there. But again, this is another really solid New England double IPA from Fermenterarna, but based on what we've had from them before, I wouldn't expect any less, to be quite honest with you. Another solid beer, so big thumbs up to them. It has my respect for sure. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel then. So, mouthfeel wise, it's almost right in the middle of the spectrum. For a New England double, I find this one actually quite light and quite clean. It's got a good little bit of oiliness to it, wetness and cleanliness, like I said, but it's more creamy than some of the other Fermenterarnas that we've had before. A higher oat content, I would say, and you can feel the creamy oatiness in this one. Going the further that you go on with it, I really like how how that goes together in this one. But yeah, nice kind of slightly oily, but still quite clean and quite creamy New England IPA. It finds a really good balance in there. In terms of IBUs, I think this one's quite low. I think this is a 25, maybe 30 IBUs. It's really not going to blow the head off you in terms of the bitterness. The malt base, as we said, it's got a wee bit of dryness toward the back of the palate, a bit more of a kind of smooth, white bready kind of thing, and you're also getting some of the oaty creaminess as well. So I really like how that comes out of this one. There is a slight degree of sweetness in there, and you've also got some nice juicy fruity notes. And I would say the fruity component of this beer is a little bit oily, but you have got a wee bit of zestiness coming out of it too. But a lovely, lovely New England double IPA, and as I said, we wouldn't expect any less of Fermenterarna. So yeah, I think that's everything I want to say about this beer. I'm going to go away, finish my film, and enjoy the rest of this one. But yeah, this was the Frequent Fishing, an 8% New England Hazy Imperial Double IPA from Fermenterarna, now based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. A really interesting one, definitely keeping up with the standards that we would expect of Fermenterarna, so it's definitely worth picking up this one if you happen to come across it. And it is a wee bit older, and it has held up very well, so that speaks for the quality of the stuff that Fermenterarna are doing. So a brewery that you do want to check out if you're into these New England hazy beers. I would love to see these guys do a West Coaster or a black IPA at some stage, because I think they would do a good job. Maybe like a Keller Pills or something like that would be another interesting project for these guys, so we'll just need to wait and see. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna. Check out my social media, check out their social media, and do check out some more beer reviews if you are interested. Thank you again, and I'll see you guys soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.